right, welcome to another episode of the Legacy Blueprint Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Evangelisti. I'm joined today by a man who has over three decades of real estate investing experience. I don't mean to make you sound old, by the way, Mike. I just think it's pretty cool.
I already know
guys.
I
think it's cool when I talk to guys that have that kind of experience, man. I'm excited to have you on the show today. I know you're going to teach our listeners a lot about the realms of, investing in real estate. You're doing it across all of North America in 2 different countries, which is awesome. And so without further ado, welcome to the show, Mike Wolf.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here, Joe.
Absolutely, brother. Thanks for being on the show. So Mike, tell us, let's just get into it, man. What are you investing in now? What's the market like? I mean, this has been a crazy year for so many real estate investors. I feel like people can't decide where they should be putting their money, where they should be spending their time, where is the most profitable resource for them. And so what do you got going on right now? What are you finding your students and your people are investing in right now?
Yeah, well, for me, like as you mentioned, I've been doing this a long time, and so I've tried a lot of different things over that time period. And for me, what's worked the best, and I've tried a lot of stuff. What's worked best, and I think what's going to work really well going forward, is rental properties. It's not sexy, it's not exciting, as flipping, etc. It looks, it would never make a great TV show. Buy real estate and wait. And
yep.
But in all honesty, what we're going to probably see coming down the pipeline, post-COVID, if there ever is a post-COVID, but what we're going to see is unfortunately a lot of people, going from being homeowners to renters yet again, which we saw, of course, back in 2007, 2008. We're probably going to see another wave of that. And the one thing that never goes out is, people are always going to need a place to live. That's never going to change. And so they're either buying, in which case I want to be the person selling to them, or they're renting, in which case I want to be the person renting to them. And so to me, that's where there's going to be a lot of upward momentum if you're in the right markets. You don't want to just buy anywhere, but you want to be in the path of progress where people are going.
Yeah, no, I love that, man. And, I haven't been in quite as long as you. I got in the business in 2007, which arguably was probably the worst time ever to jump
and the best time
to the investment. No, but I always say I had to learn the right way, if it was not only the hard way to learn, because nothing was easy back then. It was like we were, jumping in the middle of things collapsing around us. But luckily, and I say luckily, we got stuck with a lot of rehabs. And we put tenants in there, we refinanced, and we worked our way through it. But that 3, 4, 5 years, my first couple years in the business, learning to be a landlord and learning what rental properties were all about. Now, understand, we had multiple exit strategies, and being rental properties was one of them. So it was kind of like a natural course of business for us. But I didn't realize it when it was happening, and I realized it years later. And man, we were walking right into a natural occurrence of a hot rental market, because people were losing their houses, people were short selling, people were foreclosing, but they were still going and getting other jobs. So maybe they weren't making, $100,000 a year anymore. They were making 75, but they sold their $400,000 house and they moved into my $200,000 rental property, and they could affordably pay us a really, really good rental, rate. And we had the best tenant. We still have the best tenants, knock on wood. But we had great stable tenants, and the rent rates have been stable ever since. They continue to climb. So you talked about being in good areas. I've always invested in places that I would want to live in myself. Places where I felt comfortable that, God forbid the world came crashing down around me, I would move into one of my rental properties. What is your criteria for areas, if somebody's listening to this and hasn't gone out and bought rental properties? How do you determine good areas?
Yeah, well, I'm much the same as you, and I absolutely would not want to be a slumlord. I don't want to have crappy properties with crappy tenants. I want to have, so I want to get into first of all, I'll tell you how I pick a city, because I don't actually, I live up in Canada. Normally I'm a nomad. Right now I'm of course stuck in Canada for a little bit, but I don't invest up here anymore. I invest strictly in the US. And so when I'm picking a market, I look at 3 criteria. The first thing I look at is the market landlord friendly or tenant friendly. Mm-hmm. Meaning, if you go to a place like California, you get a bad tenant, they can stay in your home for, I have a friend who actually had a tenant that wasn't paying in their home for about 16 months. And they did everything in their power to try to get rid of them. And anyway, when you go to a place that's very much in favor of your tenants, you're in trouble right off the bat. And so that's the first thing I look at is landlord friendliness. The second thing I look at is, what is going to cause that market to appreciate? How I've created my wealth over the years to get to the point where I've got enough cash flow to have my freedom is, a lot of people tend to go where either for markets that are really cheap, like they'll gravitate towards places like Detroit or Buffalo. That's going to get you in trouble. It looks really good on paper. I want to go in the path of progress. I want to go where people are moving to. So right now, COVID, imagine you wake up and you're living in Manhattan, and you've got your 1-bedroom apartment that you're paying $4,000, $5,000 a month in rent on, and you've got no job. Your job just disappeared. That's not a very sustainable lifestyle for very long. You're going to eventually, you're going to run out of money really, really quick. And so a lot of people are going to be leaving expensive places and going to places where there's one, jobs, and number two, a low cost of living. And we're seeing that also on the other side of the country in California. I know personally at least a dozen people over the last few months that have left because they can't stand the taxes there anymore. The cost of living is ridiculous. They're getting pretty sick of fires, and they're leaving, and they're going to places like Texas. They're going to places like Phoenix, Vegas, Idaho, of all places. And so you want to be in the path of progress. You want to go where people are going to, because that's going to drive the markets up, and you're going to get your appreciation. And that's how you get your wealth. So that's the second thing I look at. The third thing I look at is what most people go to first. And they just look at, hey, what's the cash flow going to be? How much am I going to have to spend on the property, and what does my rent look like? And if you go to that first and you don't look at those other two, that's going to put you in a really bad position, because once again, it's going to drive you to markets that don't make sense. And usually in places that you're going to get the highest rent relative to purchase price is usually markets where the population is declining, and you're actually not going to get, instead of appreciation, you're going to get depreciation, and you're likely going to be struggling to keep your place rented. And I learned that the hard way because, a bunch of years ago, I remember when Detroit, there were like homes literally for $1. I didn't buy any dollar homes, but I bought some, $20,000 and $30,000 homes, thinking, well, how can you go wrong? Like $800 a month rent on a $20,000 investment, no brainer, I thought. It didn't work out that way. I think we had 3 properties. I think the most rent I got in any of my properties was like 2 payments for the year. And so you have to be really careful of what I call paper returns, things that look really good on paper that never materialize. And when you go into a market with high unemployment, you're going to get a lot of vandalism. Those homes got trashed over and over and over again. Needless to say, I'm not in that market anymore. And so I'm very, very careful how I pick my markets.
Man, you're hitting so many hot buttons for me right now. That's why I'm sitting here shaking my head and smiling, because I hear this all the time. And man, social media it's like a loudspeaker for people talking about what they're doing and what they're thinking, and you hear like the wrong thing all the time, right? Like, oh, I look for $200 a door, and that's how I buy. And it's like, I think the problem a lot of people get stuck with is, again, I like how you're reverse engineering it, right? They start with cash flow, and they say I buy something for $200 a door, but they don't take into account all the other stuff that you just mentioned that goes into it, right? The fact that you get a tough tenant, they're going to beat the house up. When you make $200 a month per door, and at the end of the year you made $2,500 positive, and the tenant destroys the carpet in the house, your entire year's cash flow is gone. That's right. If you have to repaint it, your entire year's cash flow is gone. Absolutely. If they destroy the kitchen, God forbid, what's that? 3 years cash flow?
Yeah, you're done. And so it's really important, and you have to listen in the right order, because when I first started, I wish I knew some of this stuff. Some of the stuff that I now teach people, I wish I would have known myself. Because a lot of times we get hung up on, I can get that extra $100 in cash flow, but we lose sight of the big picture. And the big picture is, especially if you're just starting out and maybe you're just getting into your first property or 2 or 3, when you're just starting out, really focus on appreciation. Go into markets that are going to go up, because I would much rather get 0 cash flow for 2 years, but be in a market where my home's going to be worth an extra $100,000-$200,000, as opposed to getting an extra $100 or $200 a month in rent. And so once again, if you're in the path of progress, all of a sudden, I'm actually working with one of my clients who's actually in Holland. I sell turnkey properties in Atlanta, Georgia, and he bought some properties through me in Atlanta, literally, I'm going to say 2.5, maybe 3 years ago. And he's actually looking to sell one of those properties right now. He paid $130 for it, and it's worth $250,000 right now, literally in 2 years. And he made good cash flow while he was holding it. But if he would have got lured in by something like, the Detroit homes that look like, hey, well, I can get an extra $400 a month. He'd be sitting on probably some very damaged homes that are vacant and that are probably not even worth, the 20 or 30,000 that, like I said, I bought some they're inexpensive when I bought them. They turned out to be very expensive by the time that, for trying to get to an exit strategy to get rid of them. So
Yeah.
it's expensive lessons. So you got to buy, if you buy smart, if you buy in the right markets, down the road, you're going to be able to build your portfolio to the point where you've got your freedom. But if you're just focusing on the cash flow now, that extra $50 a month isn't going to help you quit your job. So focus on getting that big paycheck down the road and then keep reinvesting. And the reason why, even though I'm Canadian, the reason why I love the United States, you guys have the 1031 exchange. So you can build your portfolio, very, very easily if you can pick the markets right and take that appreciation, reinvest, and go to, when a market, get in a market while it's low, ride it up. And then when people start fighting over property, sell, use a 1031 exchange, and then buy in another market that's lagging behind. And eventually you're going to have a big enough portfolio and enough cash flow that you won't have to worry about, you can do whatever you want. You'll have your freedom.
So let me just recapture what you just said real quick. And I hope you guys that are listening, write this down. We look for landlord friendly areas, states, right? You want to make sure that you're in a place where, God forbid, you have to evict, you can evict, right? The landlord laws, or the laws are written so that you can protect yourself as the landlord, and you have the ability to control your asset, right? You're in the path of progress, meaning you're in a place that's going to appreciate over time, hopefully not over a long period of time, but it's in a steady growth area. Jobs are moving in, people are moving in, not moving out, right? And then it has great cash flow. So you have those three pieces. You start to build your portfolio. Talk about the 1031 piece. How do you utilize that on especially a single family portfolio? Let's say somebody's built up 20 rental properties, single family in Atlanta, and they want to start to decide what's the next step.
Well, the one thing that I've done over the years is I've gone from market to market. And so, when you have a big, when you have a lot of chaos, we look back at 2007 when you were just getting started, there's different types of markets. And the markets that get hit the hardest also tend to bounce back the quickest. We call those the trophy markets. And so, the ones that come to mind are Las Vegas, where I was investing back then, Phoenix, Florida. These are places where people go, they want to invest not because of any, smart criteria, not because of any business sense. They want to invest there because that's where they vacation. And they say, oh, well, we like to go visit Mickey Mouse every year. So wouldn't it be great to have some properties in Orlando so we can check up on them? That's not the right reason to buy property, by the way. But if you're a savvy investor, you know that other people are going to do that. If you can get in at the right time and sell to these people that are buying on emotion, a lot of money in that. So what I did is I got in. I started off in Las Vegas, and everybody was. And that market was actually hit the worst of any U.S. city. It actually dropped from its peak to its lowest point. It dropped about 80%. So imagine imagine a $200,000 home in 2006 and 2007 now being worth 40, 50 grand. Like, that's how bad it got hit. And so a lot of people were they were just terrified of the market. People were not buying, except for me. I remember there was an auction that took place Monday to Friday in a parking lot, and they were auctioning off like tons of homes. And I remember it started off, there were maybe like 5 of us in that parking lot. And as time went on, then it became 10, then it became 50. Then the parking lot was overcrowded eventually. But so anyway, it's a long way of saying that if you can get in at the right time, ride that market up, wait for people to start fighting over properties, take that money, and then go to a different market that's lagging behind. So after Vegas, I made a lot of money in Vegas, took the proceeds, reinvested in Phoenix, bought a bunch of homes there, and rode that market up. That market, we weren't there all that long because it took off. We were there maybe 3 years, and there was a 6-month period where it went up about 50%. And so eventually sold off our inventory there. And that's when I started to get into a little bit of Florida, but more Atlanta. Atlanta's been kind of one of my, it is my favorite market. And so for every home that I sold in Phoenix, we could afford to buy pretty much 2 in Atlanta. We could literally double I doubled my portfolio without taking any more money out of my pocket. And so that's the best way. When you see people that have built up big portfolios, it's not because they won the lottery. It's not because they started off as millionaires. They were smart. They kept reinvesting. They picked the right markets, as opposed to a lot of people have a tendency to only invest close to home because it's convenient. Instead of doing the research, figure out what type of markets, where's the movement going to be. So like I said, the first markets are the trophy markets because there's a lot of emotion built into that. They drop the fastest because all these people bought on emotion. They also get emotional. They're afraid of losing their shirts, so they dump everything off, or they get foreclosed on because they didn't buy very smart. You pick those up. Then you go to the next markets. The next markets are the markets that actually makes business sense. If we look at Atlanta, the reason I love it, very, very landlord friendly. We can usually get rid of a bad tenant maybe 3 weeks. None of this 1 year stuff. The second criteria, as I mentioned, is you want to pick places that are going to appreciate. Well, Georgia is very, very business friendly, and they have a lot of tax incentives. So it's head office to Coca-Cola, Turner Broadcasting, Delta Airlines. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And so one thing you've got to that you notice there, it's very diversified industries. Like, I'm going to pick on Detroit again because I had such a bad experience there. But I mean, that's automotives. It was flying high in the 50s, but the future of one in the middle of what's going on right now, there's not a lot of people who just lost their job saying, I think I'm going to buy a new car today. There's not a lot of that going on. And then number two, the future of cars, it's now becoming a tech play. They're going to be self-driving, self-flying. And it's going to be Uber and Apple that are going to, companies like that, not Ford, Chrysler, GM. So that city is going to continue probably to struggle unless they reinvent themselves. When we look at a place like Atlanta, with all, if we know the travel industry is going to be very tough for Delta Airlines and all the airlines for the next little bit. That's a given. But if they start laying people off and your tenants work at Delta, well, guess what? They can work at Coca-Cola, Home Depot. There's hundreds and hundreds of massive companies that move there because of the tax benefits that they get. So that's the number two thing. And then the number three thing is the cash flow is good while you're waiting for the market to do its thing. You're not having to support your properties. You're not getting as much, at least on paper, as you would in some of the cheaper markets. But so after you do the trophy markets, then you want to go to the markets that make sense financially, where people should be investing, where they're not emotional markets. And then your third choice is to go to markets that I call kind of sleeper markets. And Kansas City, especially on the Missouri side. On the Kansas side, the laws are very much in favor of tenants. When you get to the Missouri side, it's better. And so those are sleeper markets that they tend to just be slow and steady. But all of a sudden, when everything gets expensive around it, people are going to move to those kind of markets to lower their cost of living. So if you kind of keep these things in mind and get into the markets, let the market do its thing, collect cash flow while you're waiting, and then when it makes sense, exit that market, take that money and go somewhere else. That's how you get your build that portfolio without having to keep going to your job to keep saving up down payments and that's how I did it. So it's really if I could start over again, I would have started doing exactly that a lot earlier.
Man, so I was going to say you must have a crystal ball if you're picking out these territories and just going and picking them up. And you just explained it as thoroughly as I could possibly ask you to explain it. So, I mean, for those of you that are listening, if you want to figure out how is Mike figuring out where are these cities and what's next, he just laid it all out. You have to listen to the last 5 minutes over again. So where are you heading to next, Mike? What's the next city? What's the next one on your radar? What do you see
right now. Yeah, right now we're heavily investing in Atlanta still because of all the jobs being created there. If you ever want to know where the path of progress is, follow jobs. That's where people are always going to go for jobs, and especially right now we're having mass closures of all these different businesses. It's a given that people are going to be looking for work and also to lower their cost of living. So Atlanta to me is number one in that department. I absolutely love that market for all the reasons I've already mentioned. Mm-hmm. But so that's going to be a hot one. But there's a lot of things that are really, really up in the air right now. I mean, imagine there's another wave and it hits one part of the country. Well, that part of the country is obviously one, we're going to see some really good deals potentially, but we're also going to see possibly a lot of people moving away from there. So you always want to be kind of watching what the trends are. So picking the next market, we're kind of we're watching. We're on the sidelines. We're certainly not picking yet because a lot of stuff can still happen right now.
What do you think about big cities? I mean, what do you think about New York? People seem to be moving out and businesses seem to be struggling in a big city like that. I mean, do you see that happening around the country or around the world for that matter?
Yeah, I see a lot of the expensive places, potentially seeing some pretty massive drops. I think of, Southern California, well, actually all of California, not just Southern California, the Bay Area too. All these expensive markets those aren't places that you can afford to live and not have employment. And so as we see a lot of closures, we're going to see, and we're already seeing it also within the big cities, we're seeing people moving from the city center, people that used to go drive to their office that now their bosses are realizing, hey, our employees can work from home, and why are we paying for all this expensive commercial real estate?
Yeah.
So I think once again, you've got to watch those trends, and I think we're already starting to see. I know in New York this is already the case. I know in Toronto this is the case. People are moving away from the city center, going further away, and getting much less expensive real estate and getting a lot more for their money. And so those are some of the trends. Another trend that I'm watching, social distancing continues to be a thing. We may see a lot of people saying, "Oh, I don't want to live in multifamily. I want more space. I want to have a single family home, and I want lots of space between me and my neighbors." We're not there yet, but that's something you want to keep an eye on because that could definitely become a trend. And so these are the things you always want to keep your eyes open for. What are people doing? What's the psychology? What's going through people's minds right now? And
Yeah.
I think right now everybody's thinking, okay, well, is my job still going to be there? How can I afford to keep my lifestyle? And so people are going to go to less expensive markets. They're going to go where the real estate is cheaper. And the other trend is owning to renting. And so once again, great time to get into rental properties.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think whether or not or how long COVID lasts and all that kind of thing is all speculative, but ultimately people want more space. They're going to need more space, and inner city living as an option, I think is going to, people are going to want to start to go out to more suburban areas where they can kind of spread out and have their own area and have their own space. I mean, more and more people are working virtually nowadays. More and more people have the option to work virtually nowadays. Now you got kids homeschooling, so people need to breathe. They need to have some space to go to. So when they're living in congested cities and they're in an apartment and there's nowhere to go, I can see it becoming more and more of a hassle than a convenience. I think people lived in cities for so long because it's convenient to everything, right? It's
Oh,
convenient to
absolutely.
transportation and shopping and restaurants. But when you can't utilize those things, it becomes more of a hindrance than a convenience. So I guess we'll see where that trend shifts in the next couple of years.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting for sure, and there's a lot of things that are going to affect it. Also, places that rely heavily on tourists. For New York
Mm-hmm.
City, I love New York City. Great place to visit. I don't want to own real estate there, but I love to visit there.
Same
But
here.
everything's shut down. I mean, a lot of the businesses aren't going to make it, and I just heard Broadway's now shut down till end of May. I mean, that's
Yeah.
I can't even imagine
Sad.
how horrible that is on that whole industry. But these are things you gotta look out for, and realize that the world that we had 7 months ago doesn't exist anymore and will never exist again. So what do things look like 6 months from now, 1 year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now? And once again, if you can predict semi-accurately, you don't have to be perfect, by the way, but don't be investing in places where don't be investing in cities where people are leaving. That's the one thing. And where, especially one industry, right now I'm in Calgary, Canada, and Calgary is kind of the Houston of Canada. It's an oil city, and it's struggling tremendously. It was struggling before COVID, and this did not help. And so you got to look at cities, how they're going to react to this change. Are they going to reinvent themselves? The thing I love about Atlanta, by the way, is a lot of movies are being shot there now. So in addition to all the stuff that was already going on, a lot of Hollywood is starting to shoot movies there because it's a lot cheaper, and once again, tax benefits. And so these are things you want to look at. Where are people going to? Where is employment? These are the things that will make or break your portfolio, being in the right place.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Mike, while I got you here, and I want to be respectful of your time. We're about a half hour deep. I want to get into some deeper questions. You got 30 years experience in the business. I know you teach this stuff, and obviously you're doing it at a high level. What are some of the challenges or roadblocks, or we call them our favorite failures, but there had to come a time, you've been through a lot of course corrections. You've been through a lot of economics ups and downs in 3 decades. What are some of the things that may have happened to you, or close calls, or, maybe rock bottom type stuff that's happened to you over this last 30 years that, gave you that, incentive to keep going or push through, or, get back up and keep going?
Yeah, well, I've like I said, I've tried pretty much every strategy you can imagine over the 31-year period, and I have definitely had some massive failures along the way. I remember, I think probably my most costly failure. I remember I had a property, and I used to do my own property management, and I don't recommend anybody ever do that. To me, it's like we're getting into real estate to create freedom for ourselves. And it'd be kind of like buying a McDonald's franchise and then going in there every day to flip burgers. That's not freedom. And so, but I used to do my own property management, so I've got nobody to blame but myself. But I remember I had this one tenant who I picked, and he gave me 12 post-dated checks. Every check cleared on time. It was like I never called for any repairs, nothing. Oh man, this is my dream tenant. Until one day, like probably 10 months into his rental, all of a sudden a check bounced. I'm going, that's really weird. And so I tried calling him. His number was disconnected. So I drove to the property, knocked on the door. He wasn't there. Left a note saying, hey, it must be some oversight, but your check bounced. Can you give me a call? Never called. So I went back the next day, put another notice on the door saying, okay, well, I didn't hear from you, so I'm giving you 24 hours notice. When I don't hear from you, I'm going to come into the property. And still never heard back. So the next day I went back there, let myself in, and the home was like trash. The guy had put a grow op in there. I don't know if that's common where you are, but up in Canada, especially back in those days, people would rental properties. I didn't know this, but they until it happened to me. They'd rent rental properties. They'd build a grow up, which requires lots of heat lamps and creates humidity and mold. And he tapped into the city's electrical system, because that's how they get busted when their electricity bill goes really high all of a sudden. Then they get busted. And so he actually tapped into the city's electrical. Anyway, that was a $75,000 repair bill to get that home livable again. And I remember that I was very fortunate because I actually had the $75,000 that I could have. But then, now, as I mentioned, I do turnkey properties in Atlanta, so I help people from all over the world invest in real estate. And I was, thinking, man, if this would have happened to one of my clients, a lot of them would have bankrupted them. That would have been the end of their not just their real estate career, but their end of their livelihood. Like, I can't even imagine. And so from every mistake that I've made along the way, I've turned that into a policy and changed how I do business. And so as a result of that, we do a couple of things now. One of the things that I get my property management team to do on every single tenant is, if everything checks out, they look good on paper. We check their criminal background. We check their finances. If everything checks out, before we give them a call saying, hey, come get the keys, you're good to go, our property managers randomly show up on their doorstep and say, hey, listen, we just have one more piece of paper we need signed. I just happen to be in the neighborhood. I hope you don't mind. But really what we're doing is we're seeing how they're currently living. And so if you get there and they said they have no pets and there's 12 dogs running around the backyard, that's what you're going to have in your house. If they open the door and there is a grow up in there, you're gonna find this stuff, sooner than later. And so whatever they're doing to that house is what they're going to do to your house. And so that one step is probably, we've gotten rid of a lot of bad tenants before they ever moved in. The second thing that we do is we put in our rental contracts that we're coming in every quarter to change the battery in the smoke detector and the furnace filter. And we know that if somebody is planning on doing something they're not supposed to do, they're going to go to somebody else's house and be their problem, not ours. And so little things like that. And so it was a $75,000 mistake. It's probably saved us, we've sold over 1,000 homes in Atlanta. So I'm guessing it's probably saved us millions of dollars over the 8 years we've been investing there. And so sometimes you get these really big mistakes that seem like, you just want to quit. Like after that, it was like, I really had thought maybe I should get a 9-to-5 job. This is like, anyway, it's devastating to me, but it was really a blessing in disguise. Everything that's happened to me like that along the way has turned into something that has now become a policy or a procedure that we do, and it's just helped me become a better investor and know what not to do and know what to look for. So, but I could do a whole episode for a 10-day episode on mistakes and blunders that I made over the years.
It's all the little tricks that help us fail forward, though, right? It's like, if you don't learn these things, you don't implement the SOP, the process doesn't happen. And I think the reason behind doing these type of podcasts, and I hope for the listeners that are listening, is that we're cutting out that experience. So look, you're going to go out, you're going to do these things, you're going to make up your own mistakes along the way. And Hopefully it doesn't cost you $75,000 when you make a mistake, right? But as long as you take away something from this episode and you implement it in your process, you're like, man, I remember Mike and Joe talking about that. I'm going to make sure I do this. Right. That's the importance of these.
I would definitely, those two things I mentioned, go check out where they're currently living and put in their contract and explain, be very transparent, say, hey, we're coming in every quarter, be very transparent. The best way to get rid of a bad tenant is to have them not move in the first place. So definitely
never have them.
Implement that. It'll change the quality of your tenants instantly.
Absolutely. Well, Mike, do you have anything that how do the listeners get a hold of you or find your stuff, or what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, best bet is they can email me at info@mikewolfmastery.com. Wolf just like the animal. info@mikewolfmastery.com. And I'm happy to help if you have any questions or if you're stuck on something. Like I said, I sell turnkey properties, but I also teach people how to do everything from invest in tax deeds at the auctions to wholesale. I mean, you name it. I've done, like I said, I've done just about every strategy you can imagine, and I can show you how to do that properly too.
Fantastic, brother. Any questions I forgot to ask today?
Well, actually, am I able to give away a free ebook and
yeah, absolutely. Where do they go?
Yeah, so if people go to Mike's. Let me make sure I get this right because I have a bunch of different websites. mikeswealthmastery.com. That's going to take you to a free ebook, and it talks about the top strategies you can use right now, even if you have little or no money, to either get started or to get to the next level. Because there's going to be a lot of, unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of people in trouble due to COVID. A lot of people coming down the pipeline. They're going to be losing their homes, and it's going to create an opportunity not just to make money, because that sounds horrible, taking advantage of all these people that are in trouble, but also an opportunity to go help these people and create a win-win. And so I talk about that in this ebook. And there's, to me, I don't even like the term real estate investor. I like the term problem solver, because that's what we are. We meet people all the time that are, nobody randomly puts their home up for sale. There's something behind it. They're moving up, they're moving down, they lost their job, getting a divorce, got sick. There's always a story behind it. And if we can help solve these people's problems, we can put them in a better spot and we get paid for it. And I can't think of a better way to make a living than getting paid to help other people. So
100%, brother. I can't tell you how many times sellers who start out the maddest sellers in the world end up like doing video testimonials and closing, right? It seems like, when we solve that problem, everyone's always happy at the end. So, I mean, that's no matter how ugly the situation is. But
the thing is, yeah. Oh, sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, when you help somebody, especially, usually the problem that we see, it's a money problem for them. Mm-hmm. But the thing that we don't see is behind that. When you have a big money problem, there's a pretty good chance you're having a relationship problem, and you're under stress, you're having health problems. Like all this stuff is tied together. And so you don't even know the impact you're having on some people. I used to, I had a business called Foreclosure Fixers, and I would try to help people stay in their home back in 2007, 2008. And I had one lady who she called me probably 2 years after I helped her out. And she said, I never told you this, but the day that I received your flyer, I was actually thinking of killing myself that day. And then I got your flyer and I had a conversation with you, and it changed everything. And so you don't know the impact that we can have as problem solvers / real estate investors, especially when we go out there and we ethically invest and do the right thing. And keep in mind that the other person at the end, who's on the other side of that transaction, if you can create a win for them too, you're going to be, gives you sustainability in this industry. And so many people come and go. When you do things properly, I've been doing it for 31 years. And so, the sustainability comes from doing things properly and helping other people. And when you do that, they're going to send all their friends, and you're never going to wonder where your next deal is coming from.
Absolutely. Awesome, Mike. Well, I appreciate you being on the show, brother. It's so many great takeaways. Guys, if you listen to this, you found value in it, all we ask is that you share it with others. Send them a message, give us a 5-star review, tell everybody about it, send them to the show and have them listen to the replay. Mike Wolf, you brought the heat today, man. Great takeaways, especially for people that want to get into real estate investing. They know where to find you, mikewolfmastery.com. We'll make sure we post all the links in the show notes. Make sure you guys go check them out. Mike, thanks for being on the show, man.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to see you.
Absolutely.